were you seeing in rugby that attracted you to wanting to start to play professionally for rugby?
Well, that wasn't, I mean, that actually wasn't even on my radar. When I joined Suffolk, the women's team founder, Jenny Munster, wrote an article for Rugby Magazine, like how to start a women's club.
Hmm.
And that I was like, there's a rugby magazine? And immediately submitted my resume and was just like, you give me 2 weeks notice, I will quit my job and work for you kind of thing. And it just so happened to align with their managing editor cycling out. So it was really luck. And so it was it was like probably a month of realizing the magazine existed, submitting a resume and getting hired. So
And this was 2005 whenever you got hired for Rugby Mag, correct?
yeah, yeah.
So, you're right at that pinnacle. This is we're about 2 years away from Rugby World Cup for '07. It's kind of that like loose era of rugby, early 2000s, where it felt like things were starting to come together. You started to see the pieces. From your perspective, what was it that you felt was needed from rugby to help maybe take that next step?
Well, at that time, so my mentor was Ed Haggerty, and he obviously had a grip on what was happening in the US. And so I was still really just like learning as much as I possibly could. And obviously you keep doing that every day. So I don't know if at 2007 I really had an idea of what would launch rugby to the next, the next stage. I still needed to. I had yet to go to my first World Cup. I had yet to go to my first Women's World Cup. I think that's when it starts to set in, like what's different around the world. I don't think I had any epiphanies at that point in my career.
Well, whenever you switch, so I'll use me for example. So switching from a player to a media person, I mean, there's the obvious concept of increasing your perspective because now you have to focus on more. But whenever as a player, it was very easy for me to be very insular. I play with my team, love the guys. Whenever we go into the games, it's me versus the opponents. We want to go kill the opponents. We'll have fun, but they're still the opponents. You get to know them because you played against them multiple times, but it's still kind of this very surface relationship that's within the competitive field. But whenever I moved into as a media member, it started realizing a lot more. I started seeing a lot more of the connections that came with people, especially with a lot of what I'll call old heads that had been playing for a while, and you start to see kind of a lot more whys as to what was happening in rugby in the general area. Whenever you moved over from player to media person, what was that balance like for you? Because it never feels like it's a very cut off one and then you go to the other. It always seems like there's an overlay. Like, what was that transition like for you?
Well, I think you find yourself, for example, like at drink ups talking, like educating people, instead of like when you are just a player, you can talk about the hit or this, the player, connect like that. But then when you have this next level knowledge and you realize that that's a huge barrier, I guess, like towards growth, like people just not understanding what's happening, whether it's in the next state, the next region, the country, and you're just perpetually like fueled to educate that, that president or that match secretary or whomever, whenever you get a chance to talk to them face to face, because that the more that people understand, the more about the country, we'll be more connected, we'll share more information. So I think in that regard, getting into the media and melding that with the whole, still being a player, it definitely changed some of my casual conversations with people face to face, because you just feel like you always feel compelled to, educate people without sounding condescending.
You're just like, it's like I've received all this knowledge, but how do I tell you without coming off like a know-it-all?
Yeah, exactly.
And I can see that. Like, again, I've always found that, once I've started taking in all this information, and like you said, you start wanting to say, okay, instead of it, let's being about, oh, what did we do this weekend, or oh, let's go out and do this. It's like, man, we got like some real, there's some issues or obstacles, or there's this exciting thing that I'm seeing. Like, did you guys know this and this and this and this? And people kind of look at you weird. Did you, especially in an area like New York, where you guys have such a encompassing amount of rugby? Did you feel like there was maybe was well? Let me restate the question. Was there kind of a dichotomy difference in what you felt? Uh, what you kind of felt with the players versus what you felt with this greater knowledge. So what I mean, and saying it better, being able to play and being able to see these things differently. What did the interaction with the players, your teammates, end up being like? Did you feel like they were more opportune to be able to take in information, or?
Yes and no, because I think when you're in a team, that they've got so many other concerns going on, who's starting, these connections, blah, blah, blah. And like, sure, you can sit down and talk about some of that, but really that was kind of shared amongst the, like the leaders, the board. Like, I think they were pretty educated on a, day-to-day basis. We weren't really talking bigger issue. But they kind of knew that they could always come to me if they did have a question. And at the very least, I could connect people. But yeah, otherwise you indulge that too much and they start walking away from you at the like, here comes Jackie with her diatribe. So you got to balance that a little bit.